Welcome to the third episode of the Revolution Today podcast. This episode is by the wonderful people on my Patreon. That is patreon.com/revolutiontoday. If you'd like to sponsor me monetarily and donate and support me monthly, go to that link in the description, and I'd be greatly appreciative of your support, although it is not necessary. Today we have a couple topics to cover today. We have the basic income bill that Representative Omar has introduced to the House. And we also want to talk about AOC and whether or not you think she's a grift. Anyways, let's get to it. So I wanted to start out with this basic income bill that has been released, or introduced, I should say. But before I get started with that, I'd like to just clarify that this is not a universal basic income bill. This is basic income, guaranteed income. So it is means tested. It is not universal, and its makeup, the bill itself is guaranteed income, but it is means tested. I'm not sure exactly the specifications and the requirements for this bill. I only do know that this bill it's up to $1,200 a month for adults and $600 for kids. It is called the Support Act, the Sending Unconditional Payments to People Overcoming Resistances to Triumph. And really this bill isn't just about basic income. Basic income is the main header of this whole bill and the main piece of it. You have also the genuine progress indicator. Now, if you were like me, if you were a supporter of Andrew Yang, you know that he was talking about the American Scorecard and measuring not based on GDP and production and money and that sort of thing. He was focused on promoting a measurement of happiness, indicator of how happy we are, how less depressed we are, and that sort of thing. Really just based off of, instead of based off of money and product value and production, it's based off of human needs, human emotion, happiness in the general sense. His American Scorecard was based off of indicating the happiness of people, and based off of those sort of indicators, apart from GDP and what that would indicate and measure. But this is a very similar thing. You have this is going to provide an alternate economic metric that supplements the GDP. It's not replacing it, it's supplementing it, but giving, calculating it and really measuring other factors apart from economic, apart from economic factors. Like the GDP focuses on money, production, economy. This is going to supplement that with other factors that involve human needs, human feelings, like, different things with involving the human nature. And how humans are actually doing in this economy and doing in this society as a whole. Because I think it's really important that we measure human needs and human feeling in this society. Because if you just measure people in a monetary sense and compare them to a money value and kind of see them as a number rather than a person, then you have an issue, because then you're not really looking at the problems associated with society. You're looking at, you're basically looking at a human being as, okay, we're going to measure this human being on whether they're productive or not in society, and whether they're, producing and participating in the economy, and whether they're generating money or income or profits and stuff like that. So really, if you look at it like that way, you're not really addressing the problems of society and the problem of humanity. You're looking at it in a numbers kind of way, in a money kind of way, in an economic kind of way. So then you have people who, people who are like depressed, suicidal, um, people who are really like down and low income, those sort of people, that doesn't get measured accurately by the GDP. So really this would measure like, hey, not everybody's happy, not everybody is doing well with income, not everybody's doing well mentally. Then that becomes a factor, because then you actually can see the issues at hand in society involving humans and the human nature. And you see that instead of seeing money, numbers, economy, that sort of thing. You see human nature and you see problems within society when it comes to humans. And that itself will allow people to finally see the reality of things, that they won't look at human beings as numbers. They'll see them as people. And then this will allow us as a society to see that, people aren't doing so good mentally. People aren't doing so good income wise. People aren't doing so good with their emotions. They're not happy. They're not hopeful. Then they see the real picture, and people actually see what's really happening, and then they want to go and take the opportunity and really change things and really try to make those factors better. Because if you don't measure those factors, no one's going to pay attention to those things, because you could sit here and say, oh, half the country is depressed and suicidal, half the country is unhappy, half the country is low income, they have no money, they have no way to better themselves. You could say that, but then in the end of the day, no one's going to care. No one's going to pay attention to that. No one's going to really even worry about that. But if you start measuring in that way and start measuring those factors within society, then more people will become more aware of the issues that the society faces, and they'll be more accepting of those facts and more willing to fight to make that a better outcome. They'll fight for different policies and different ideas to really change those metrics and make them more positive and growing on the scale and the graph. Instead of having the line on the graph go down on certain metrics such as income, happiness, mental health wise, drug use, and that sort of thing, you won't see the line go down, because once you start measuring and start reporting the numbers associated with happiness and mental health and drug use and income, then people will see those numbers and be like, that's pretty terrible. Because if you look at GDP right now, a lot of people see the numbers of GDP and think, oh no, our economy is failing, we got to do something about that. But when you try to tell somebody, hey, half the country is depressed and suicidal, half the country is unhappy, half the country is low income, like, obviously those numbers aren't correct, but that's an example I'm giving. But you say something like that, they don't care. They'll be less likely to do something because, hey, someone just said something randomly and I'm just supposed to take their word for it. But if you measure in these factors such as happiness, mental health, and drug use, then more people will be likely to want to change things and make that a better metric, because then they'll be like, okay, I want to change that because I don't want the line on the graph going down. I want it going up for all metrics, like except for, well, certain things like income. I want that metric going up. Happiness, I want that going up. Depression, I want that going down. Drug use, I want that going down. But they won't do anything about it because it's not reported on any metric or any sort of scale nationally. But if we do that and we actually implement the scale, the indicator, then of course you're going to have people who are going to see the numbers and they're going to be like, really not surprised, but really like motivated to want to change and make things better, if you get what I'm saying. So that is a part of this bill, and that is going to be a great piece that really uh, helps motivate the general populace to want to better things in this country and better society, because then they're more aware of the problems that are going that are problems that are appearing in this nation. It'll measure those things, and more people will be made aware of the issues, and they'll be more motivated to actually do something. But what's great about this bill is not just that. That's a side piece. It's like a it's a side piece, really. It's not the main focus. It's on the side stage. The main thing is the basic income part of it, and that's the best part, because like I said, well, I have my opinions on basic income and universal basic income and how I think it should go. But this bill, although it is means tested, like I said, I don't know what the requirements are, but it is means tested. But apart from that, I mean, I don't like means testing at all. I think means testing hinders and causes a lot of headache, stress, and bureaucracy that really just hurts the people that it's intending to help in the end. Like like the welfare programs we have of today, food stamps, social security, stability, name it, whatever there is, whatever welfare program there is, it's not good, because you have so many welfare programs with restrictions, with restrictions, what's the word, requirements. You have these sort of programs that require you to be under a certain income, or require you to be in a certain situation, and then on top of that, there's restrictions like, okay, you got to be under the you gotta make only this amount. You can't buy this thing. You can't use this money for that or this. You can't get this certain food. It's really restrictive and full of red tape and bureaucracy, because and like I said, it doesn't help the people who actually need that program. And I think that, and I'm a big believer in universal services, taking away the welfare system, completely just destroying it, and replacing it with a universal welfare system that is not means tested, that is open to all who need it. And in turn, it would help a lot better, because right now we're wasting a lot of resources in the government trying to figure out who has what income, who is in what situation, so they can be given access to the programs. I think that that's a waste of resources in the government. I think there's a waste of time, and at the end of the day, it doesn't help the people who actually need those services. So, like I said, I believe in a universal service system where everything is available to everybody who need it, and there's no restrictions, no requirements. Everybody's has equal access to the welfare system, and it is not means tested. But with this basic income, it is means tested. Like I said, I don't know what the requirements are. All I do know is that it's $1,200 per month for adults and $600 for kids. Now, in my opinion, and I don't think I've gone over this opinion yet, but with universal basic income, my opinion is that it should be universal. That's an opinion that everybody, I mean, most supporters of basic income want it to be universal. They don't want it to be means tested and, um, you know, um, bogged down with a bunch of like red tape and all that. They want it to be universal, so everybody gets access to it and everybody gets a check, a certain amount of money a month. But for me, I'm more of a believer in that universal basic income should be $2,000 a month. I think that, first of all, we got to have the basic income. If basic income is to come to this country, it needs to be universal. But I also think that, in my opinion, universal basic income should be $2,000 a month. Because if you do that math, I'm not a good math whiz. I'm not that smart with when it comes to math. But if you take the cost of inflation in relation to minimum wage, and you apply the cost of inflation to the um the average minimum wage. It should be around $22 now. If it were to stay up to date with the cost of inflation. So instead of being like $7 to $8 an hour, it should be more like $22, $23 an hour. And so if you take $22 or $23 an hour, you add that all together hourly, and then you take the total number you get in a week. Then you add that up over 4 weeks. Then it gives you around 2,000 to 24,000 or 2,000 to 2,400 a month. So that's why I'm a big believer of UBI being 2,000 a month, because I think that people should be given its basic income, like the basic, meaning it should be the basic income, that the most basic income that somebody can earn in society today is a minimum wage job, because there's no jobs below minimum wage that exist. So it's in my belief that if we're talking about universal basic income, and we're talking about the basic of basic income, then it needs to be 2,000 a month to be able to be tied to minimum wage, because minimum wage at this moment is the basic income that someone can receive in this country, or in the world actually, but specifically in this country. That's why I believe it should be 2,000. But there are some who disagree and think it should be lower. Some think it should be more than 2,000. But I think 2,000 is a good amount, because it's right up there with minimum wage. It's perfect. It's a perfect middle ground between someone who's getting nothing and someone who is making, like, it bridges the gap between those who can't make any money and those who are making minimum wage. And it says, hey, you at least deserve a minimum income that is similar, or not similar, but tied to minimum wage. That you deserve that opportunity you deserve that chance. You deserve an income that is almost close to what minimum wage should be today. So it's definitely something that should be considered. Although, like I said, I'm in favor of basic income at all. Like any basic income that comes to the table, I'm in favor of. Although I'm not gonna be completely supportive for a long term, because, like I said, I think long term it should be universal and be 2,000 a month. But for this 1,200 a month, 600 for kids, basic guaranteed income bill, I think that this is a good first step in making universal basic income a reality in this country. I'm not gonna push this down. I'm not gonna fight it, because I'll take what I can get. I whatever's on the table, if it's even close to a universal basic income, I'll take it. And this is the closest thing we're going to get to a universal basic income at this time. So I think that for me, and for all of you out there who are universal basic income supporters, UBI supporters, I think you should definitely consider supporting this bill, even though it is means tested and it's not completely universal. I think that you should at least fight for it and support it, because it is like the first step to getting a universal basic income passed in this country. It's almost like the domino effect. This is like the first domino, and then once you knock this one over, like this gets passed, then the domino effect kicks in, and eventually every domino falls over until we get to the last domino, which is universal basic income. And then once this happens, now this is the fun part, because once you pass a basic income bill or a universal basic income bill, then you have the opportunity to see it be introduced internationally, because once one Western country does universal basic income, then the rest of the world follows suit and decides, you know what, that's a good idea, let's do it. Which means once we do it, someone else will do it, and then it'll inspire other nations to do it as well, and then we'll have a whole entire world that is founded on universal basic income, because the whole goal really of universal basic income, or basic income in general, is to give people a floor to stand on, to be able to start with their basics covered, and they can choose whether they want to stay with just that basic income and that basic needs covered, or if they want to go higher and achieve greater things. So really, it's meant to provide a floor for most people, for all people, and then they can decide how they want to live their life and what they want to do with it. But this is the real key to ending poverty in this nation, because poverty is taking over, and it's becoming uncontrollable. You know, I have other gripes with it. For example, like housing crisis, how we have more houses than homeless people, and yet we somehow can't afford to house these homeless people in vacant houses. It's really itself a major issue. Poverty is a major moral issue in this country, well, in the world as well. And I think that it should be the job of the government. It should poverty is a choice. Poverty is a policy choice. I think it should be the goal of the government and the goal of society to work together to abolish poverty completely. Because in this day and age, there's no need for poverty. We have, we're the richest, most prosperous nation in the world currently. Um, we have automation starting to take over and starting to produce things for us. Um, we have we have tons of vacant houses that could be used for people who are homeless. We just have abundance of resources that could be used to end poverty, and we don't do it. So really, poverty is a policy choice by the government, and it's something that should be abolished and should be fought against. Because really, in the end of it all, we're all human beings on this planet. We're basically on a floating rock in the middle of nothingness, in which is space. And sit here and say that, like, that someone should be poor or someone should be homeless on a floating rock, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like way back in the day, thousands of years ago, excuse me, thousands of years ago, when like there were cavemen, hunter gatherers, they all lived off the land. There was no homeless people, there was no poor people. Everybody just lived off the land. And the thing is, nowadays we've made it so that society itself is based around currency, specifically fiat currency, which is paper money. And that in turn makes it impossible for somebody poor, that makes it impossible for people to survive, because it promotes poverty, and specifically capitalism promotes poverty, because it makes it so that really capitalism can only exist if there's poverty. Capitalism creates poverty, but poverty is needed for capitalism to exist. So really, without poverty, capitalism can exist. And that's why with the fiat currency, the paper money, it's created a society that promotes poverty and makes poverty a huge issue. But with basic income, with this bill, this is the first step in making poverty thing of the past. Over time, I think that with this, I think it should be upgraded at some point to a universal basic income that is $2,000 a month, so that everybody gets a piece of that pie. Everybody gets a slice. Nobody's left out, because if there's red tape, there's bureaucracy, that just leads to issues, that leads to people being left out, and really it just doesn't in the end help people in the way that it should. So for me personally, I would most likely support this bill. I would support this bill completely as a first step. But then the next step should be universal basic income at 2,000 a month. That should be the next goal. First goal should be getting this passed, so at least some people get the basic income and have the money to support themselves. And then the next step after that, we should go and move forward, and then push once this bill, this support act, proves that basic income actually works. That's probably one of the things that it not only is this meant to help people who need money, it's also meant to prove the positive impact and of basic income on society. And this really will make more and more people see the necessity of this of basic income, and it will really improve the popularity of it. So really, this is a good first step, but then we need to move on to the next step of getting a universal basic income passed at 2,000 a month. Again, this episode of the Revolution Today podcast is sponsored by the wonderful people on my Patreon who support me. Patreon.com/RevolutionToday. I wanted to talk about real quickly AOC's campaign and why I think it's a grift. Technically, you could say it's a grift because she campaigned on the big things like Medicare for all, housing is a human right, Green New Deal, those sort of things. And of course, when she first got into office, she did fight for those things and really push for those things. But over time, looking at her career now and what she's doing, it seems she's less willing to fight for these things like Medicare for all, Green New Deal. She says on her website here that she supports, the bill, the Medicare for All Act that's in Congress, and supports these policies. But I haven't seen a whole lot of support from her in regard to these ideas and these issues. Because for me, it seems, and I think for a lot of people, now I'm not saying I'm going to sit here and complain about her not forcing the vote. That whole thing was kind of dumb because it didn't get anywhere and no one did it. So it was just a waste of time on Twitter. Everyone was causing uproar over this, and it didn't end up working out because nobody in Congress even bothered to listen to it. They didn't even know it existed. They probably knew it existed. They just didn't care to do anything. But what I'm talking about really is not that whole situation because that's a dead horse, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But I wanted to talk about really why I think she's a grift. Because nowadays, and a lot of people agree with me, she's gotten more establishment. She used to when she was campaigning for her election, she like, oh, Medicare for all, housing is a human right, we need a Green New Deal, and she sounded very progressive. And over time, I think Washington has just came into her. Washington has gotten to her. I think that Washington has corrupted her mind and corrupted her place in government. Because now she seems way more establishment. She supports Nancy Pelosi. She supports establishment Democrats. She fights. She doesn't fight hard enough for these issues. You know, when she first started, everyone thought, "Oh, this is it. She's gonna change things. She's gonna be amazing. She's gonna fight for what we want, and we might actually get what we need out of her." No, and especially with the squad, Presley, Lieb, Omar. We haven't gotten anything from them. I mean, yes, Omar's putting a guaranteed income bill out, like we talked about earlier, but there hasn't been much fight from the squad. I think the squad itself has kind of succumbed to the establishment or not establishment, the establishment corruption and way of thinking in Washington. They don't fight nearly as hard for Medicare for all. They don't fight nearly as hard for Green New Deal. They're more like, I wouldn't say opportunist, because they definitely don't fight when the opportunity arises. They definitely speak their minds and they do what they want. But I think that they just don't really put in enough effort when it comes to these policies. They're really more let's talk about this. So last year, I think it was last year, or maybe it was early this year, I don't know exactly, we had a bunch of elections in New York. We had what's his name? Elliot Engel. He was running running for re-election as a U.S. representative from New York. I don't know I forget what district, but he was fighting for re-election. And we had Jamal Bowman come in there and take over, win the thing, take Engel and kick them out of his spot in Congress. And then we had a couple others like Mondaire Jones. We had that sort of thing. We also had Cori Bush, who was in St. Louis. We had a couple victories where we gained support in Congress with expansion of the squad. But it seems like even with those guys who were progressive, who said they were going to fight for these things, it seems as soon as they got there, their minds were just corrupted and they gave up on fighting for what was right, because they were fighting and talking about, getting rid of the establishment and being progressive and fighting for what's right. And as soon as they get there, Nancy Pelosi offers each of them a seat, not a seat, a position in Congress. Like they've gotten like special committee positions, different stuff like that. And they took those positions, and ever since they've been so supportive and positive of Nancy Pelosi. And it's really not good that we really trust in them, go to them in, and they go and stab us in the back by supporting Pelosi, because Pelosi, she's very rich, she's very establishment, she's very corporate, and she doesn't support. She came out recently saying she doesn't support student debt cancellation. She doesn't support, I'm guaranteeing, Medicare for all. Nor does she support a Green New Deal. She was even against universal basic income, and it was first being talked about during the beginning of the pandemic. She was totally against that. She was against a lot of the progressive ideas that we that a lot of us support and want. But yeah, the squad expanded. Nancy Pelosi swooped in, gave them all positions within committees, and now they're all cozied up next to her, so doing whatever she asks, supporting her every move. and it's kind of disgusting to see because they just they just went behind our backs. Um, they were progressive, and they were fighting for these things. They told us, "Hey, we don't support these establishment Democrats. We're gonna do what's right. We're gonna support Medicare for all this stuff." And then they go behind our backs and they start getting behind Pelosi. Now there was a challenger against Pelosi in San Francisco. Barr, I think that's how you say it. He was fighting to take down Pelosi. He didn't win. He had a lot of votes though, more than I think. That's more than I think has ever gone through that Senate, that not Senate race, that congressional race. Pelosi's first time being elected. That's been, I think that he had the largest number of votes since Pelosi was elected for first around. And so he was a challenger to Pelosi. He didn't win. Sadly, Pelosi's still in charge. Pelosi knows how to play the part. She knows how to keep things in line because, of course, she gave everybody in the squad a piece, part in the committees. They have special privileges and everything like that, and somehow they just went along with it. If I was in there, I would be like, I would just say up straight up, I'd be like, no, I don't want your positions. I don't want you to give me a part in these committees because I'm not gonna bow down to you. I'm not gonna submit to you. I'm here to make change, and you're standing in my way. But these guys, they let her walk right over them, and it really just wasn't a good situation for the American. It was for them. It was a win because they got support of Pelosi. They got their positions. They got recognition. They're on the up and up, while the Americans are falling apart. So for them, it was great. For us, it wasn't. But like, yeah, Cori Bush, she did go a week ago. There was the eviction moratorium was expiring. She slept out in front of the Capitol and fought for an extension on the moratorium so people wouldn't go homeless and be evicted from their homes. But let's talk about that because when she was there, people showed up. They sat with her and they were trying to protest it. And then you had a bunch of like senators and congressmen show up and take pictures and photo ops like, hey, look at me. I'm here. I showed up. Let's go. But really, to be honest, majority of the people that showed up to take pictures, they wouldn't have done anything if had Cori Bush not even started that protest. I'm guaranteeing you, most of those politicians that showed up to take pictures and be supportive for a photo op, they wouldn't have even dared to do what she did had she not done it. Like if Cori Bush hadn't done what she did, none of those people that showed up for photo ops would have done the same thing. They wouldn't. And so really, I think Bernie Sanders showed up, and I think he's the only genuine one that showed up. Mondaire Jones showed up. Bowman showed up. They were kind of genuine, but everyone else that showed up, like, they just didn't seem genuine to me, and they didn't seem like they actually were there to actually make a difference. They were just there for the photo op to show their constituents that, hey, I'm doing something, instead of taking money from corporations. I'm actually here fighting for something, guys. I did it. But what really makes me mad is, so you had Cori Bush. She was sitting in the front of the steps of the Capitol building, and she was protesting the eviction moratorium expiring. As soon as that eviction moratorium gets extended, she's done. She did her job. She's like, I'm out. I'm going back to my normal thing. But there were people who still protested out front of the Capitol. What's crazy is this was a big thing on Twitter. I think it was on Twitter. These people who were protesting at the Capitol with Cori Bush. Once she left, the cops went in and started getting violent and started harassing them and forcing them out. And they were like, they said, well, the cops were nice when a representative was here, but once the representative is gone, they go back to being their violent, angry selves. And that's just angers me because the cops like the cops play nice guy when senators or congressmen show up, and now we get to continue doing what we normally do. And they went and they kicked the people who were there at the steps protesting. They kicked them out, sent them across the street, and they were stuck with all their stuff across the street away from the Capitol building. um and the cops wouldn't let them in. They weren't treating them right, and it angered me. But it just goes to show that the cops uh play it up as a they play it up like it's a show for the Congress people and the senators. And then once they leave, the show's over. They get back to being aggressive and violent and abusive and that sort of thing. But they ended up getting the moratorium in the end of it all, so that's a good thing. It extended and everything's back. Everything should be good for the time being. Hopefully this basic income bill gets passed so that way more people have money in their pockets to be able to survive instead of being evicted at every chance that there is. And yeah, overall, like, yeah, I don't agree with the squad or AOC. I think that what they did was a grift because they usually don't care to fight for things that they campaigned on. Medicare for all isn't really a big issue, priority. I don't want to get into this anymore. Really, I just think that, in my opinion, AOC is a grift, or the squad is a grift, because they just don't put the effort in to fight really hard for these things, in my opinion. But I'm just focused. Really, I don't really care about the squad. Too much. I'm just focused mainly on this basic income bill because it would definitely help me out a lot, and it would be very beneficial towards me and people like me. But that's gonna be hopefully enacted soon and passed, and then down in the near future we get universal basic income, so everybody in the country gets a piece. That would be awesome. That would be great, actually. A good I hope. So that's a dream I have, that everybody gets access to universal basic income and we all get 2,000 a month, and we can live our lives and be happy and be who we want to be. That's the whole point of it. Just be who you want to be, live your life the way you want to live, and just be yourself. So those are the issues, the topics at hand. Apart from that, got nothing else to say. I'm just gonna end it here. Once again, shout out to YouTube, Spotify, Google Playlist, Apple Podcast. Did I say Google Playlist? I meant Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. Shout out to all the people that are listening on the different platforms. There's too many to name. But if you are new to this podcast, if you haven't listened to the rest of the episodes, please go listen to those. And also, make sure you're following. Make sure you give this podcast 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and any other podcast platform where you watch. That'll do it for this one. I appreciate everybody. If you're on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. Please make sure to give a like. Please make sure to share the podcast. I'm trying to grow this thing big. We're going to go far on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the podcast sites. And we're going to do a lot. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.